Okay,
Okay.
the regular board meeting of the Park District, Highland Park is called to order on Tuesday, March 31st, 2020 at 6:00 p.m. Roxanne, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Here.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Here.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf. Here. Vice President Ruttenberg,
Here.
President Kaplan.
I'm here as well. All right, and I thank everybody. This will be our only long distance meeting. Now that we've called the roll, are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none. First item on the agenda is approval of resolution 2020-07, excuse me, adopting temporary rules for public comment due to COVID-19. Executive Director
Yes.
Holmes to present.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Brian. So due to the temporary social distancing and the sheltering in place, we are complying with Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2020-07, suspending certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act and Executive Order 2020-10 to stay at home. Therefore, the Park District is conducting our Park Board meeting tonight and will be throughout the order remotely during the duration of that executive order. As a result, the Park District will be live streaming our Park Board meetings for the public to view, and we are accepting public comment via email as indicated on our posted agenda. These procedures are to ensure our continued compliance with the Open Meetings Act. So with this, we are recommending approval of Resolution 2020-07, adopting temporary rules for public comment during the Governor's declaration of emergency. Any questions?
Okay, and we talked about, we're going to go through in order of roll call so that we're not all talking over each other. So start with Commissioner Bernstein.
I move for approval.
Well, I'm wondering if anybody has any comment. Commissioner Grossberg.
Yeah, I understand that we're running the meeting differently because of this executive order. What does it mean specifically for the powers of the president and the executive director?
Well, so this agenda item that we're discussing right now is only regarding public comment.
Okay, then nothing.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf.
Nope, I'm good.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
No comments.
I have none as well. Can I get a motion to approve Resolution 2020-07, adopting temporary rules for public comment due to COVID-19?
So
So
moved.
moved. A second.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Commissioner Bernstein,
None.
Commissioner Grossberg,
No.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf,
None.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
No comments.
Okay, I've none either. Roxanne, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Yes.
and President Kaplan.
Aye, motion carries. Next agenda, public comment for items on the agenda. Due to the national emergency, members of the public, we've asked to submit comments via email to be read aloud during tonight's meeting. Executive Director Romes, have we received any comments?
No, we have not.
Okay. Next item is the Emergency Operations Planning and Response to COVID-19. Executive Director Romes to present.
Thank you again. Okay, so over the past 2 weeks, every one of us who is listening to this meeting right now has experienced a significant change in their life. The routines and lifestyles that we lived 2 weeks ago have abruptly changed, and furthermore, continues to change each and every day that we learn more about the coronavirus and understand its impact in our country, our state, and in our very own community. Some difficult decisions have been made over the past few weeks, all for the health and safety of our community, including a stay-at-home order that has each of us experiencing life in a new and different way. As most of you know, this order was extended today to continue through April 30th. As providers of parks and recreation, we exist to serve our community by providing enriching programs, services, parks, playgrounds, facilities, and natural areas that enrich our residents' lives. For us, providing these services is not just a means to making a living, but it's literally a way of life that we look forward to each and every day. The smiling faces at special events like daddy-daughter date night, the laughs at summer camp, high fives at baseball games, the parent cheers during an ice show, dance show, theater show. All of these things are small displays of joy that provide us a sense of meaning and gives us purpose. We know how challenging these times are for all of our residents, and we're all here with you working together and our local government partners with our healthcare providers, first responders, police officers, and with you to get through these challenging times. And we want to see everyone back to the way of living that provides enrichment and joy that everyone has been accustomed to receiving from the Park District. So over the past 2 weeks, we've been focused as staff on 3 primary initiatives that I want to touch on. The 3 initiatives we've really focused on is, of course, our emergency action planning, but also a lot of strategic planning and business planning. So our emergency planning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic was and is our first priority, and that is to ensure the health and safety of all our residents and staff. To this end, the Park District closed all our facilities, all of our playgrounds, while providing regulations for safe outdoor exercising at our parks and natural areas and practicing social distancing. For those who frequent our parks, you've seen that we've posted signage, closed our public restrooms, and in some cases have put up barriers to entering or participating in sports or other activities where groups of 10 or more would typically gather. While this was a difficult decision to make, it was an important one. As our local leaders have been commuting regularly, staying at home saves lives. During this time of closure, our staff continues to monitor our parks and facilities, and we conduct essential maintenance and operations. The second thing is our strategic planning. In an effort to continue our mission of enriching our residents' lives, staff has been working hard to ensure our residents can continue staying active and healthy during the stay-at-home order by providing online activities for all ages and interests on our website and Facebook page. We've had nearly 7,000 residents view and take advantage of these online resources. Because our facilities are closed, there are hundreds of programs that we had to cancel and be rescheduled. There's thousands of registrations that need to be refunded. And while some classes may have the option to be rescheduled, we are preparing refunds to be sent back to families over the next few weeks. All memberships have been put on hold, and we are no longer charging for our services during this time of closure. Memberships will be reactivated once we open, and program refunds will also be returned in accordance with our refund policies. In the meantime, staff has been using this time to evaluate and plan for new and different procedures, setting a course of action that ensures when all of our residents, all of our customers return to our playgrounds, our ball fields, our courts and facilities, you will have security in knowing that we are implementing the best practices to keep you and your family safe and healthy. So again, for the next month, our city and state are asking all residents to save lives by staying home. We recognize the importance of maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and we support getting outside to get some fresh air, go for a walk, a jog, or bike. However, you must be smart and do your part. If you or your children are in our parks, playing sports are not permitted. Gathering in groups is not permitted. Please be respectful and mindful of not gathering in groups and keeping 6-foot distance from other people while you're on our trails in our parks. The third thing that staff has been focused on is our business planning. Like every other service provider that exists to serve your needs through the delivery of an experience rather than a physical product, the Park District is experiencing significant financial loss from this closure. Each month that we are closed accounts for an average of nearly $500,000 of lost revenue. As many of you know, as you all know on the board, program fees provide for 50% of Park District financing. This revenue contributes to support the purchase of capital infrastructure, such as playgrounds, park paths, fitness equipment, maintenance of our 800 acres of open space, natural areas, 7 facilities, 4 beaches, and the staff that deliver our programs and services. We are working daily to create a sustainable business model during a time of complete uncertainty. To this end, we have 3 objectives in our business planning efforts. The first one is to evaluate our monthly operating expenditures. In an effort to reduce spending during this time of closure, staff has been preparing projections that show monthly revenue loss, anticipating closures of 30 days, 60, 90 days, and beyond. We've estimated the amount of revenue that would be lost, and we're evaluating every line item in our operating budget to see where we can cut costs in the short term and the long term. Keeping in mind that when we do reopen, our customers will expect the same quality of programming and services that they've been accustomed to. The second thing we've been doing is evaluating staffing levels in an effort to reduce payroll during the time of closure. Currently, full-time and part-time staff has been paid during the closure. Park District has always strived to be known as an employer of choice, and we know how difficult it is to recruit and retain the best staff. With this in mind, we've always worked to provide competitive salary benefits to our part-time and full-time staff. While many full-time staff are either still coming in daily to check on facilities and parks or conduct necessary business functions, many other are working full-time from home. However, we realize during this difficult time, we are unable to have our part-time frontline staff come to work every day during this closure. As a result, we know that over the next few weeks, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions. So we're working very closely with all of our staff, with the board, and engaging in conversations with our professional associations, our neighboring park districts, our risk management firm, our attorneys, to make sure that we can make the most responsible decisions on behalf of the community and the staff who serve the Park District. These are undoubtedly some extremely difficult decisions that we are contemplating. The third thing that we are doing in regards to our business planning is evaluating capital projects. We want to ensure that we have adequate cash flow that keeps us operational in the currently, in the short term, and in the long term. Therefore, we have evaluated every line item in our capital plan, and we are considering deferral of projects to 2021, and in some case, elimination of projects, specifically during the time of closure, but potentially in the future as well. As we review capital projects tonight and over the next few months, we are just working to ensure the Park District remains fiscally responsible in all of our decisions going forward. Again, I just want to reiterate, these are difficult decisions that we are making in unprecedented times. In many regards, we're working around the clock to develop best practices in a time where there is uncertainty for our staff, for the board, and for the community. I do want to point out, amidst this time of struggle, there are some good news. I am very happy to report, to my knowledge, there have not been any reported cases of COVID-19 with any customers that have been in our facilities or with any staff that we are aware of at this time. We're obviously thankful and grateful for that, and for those who do have been the COVID-19, coronavirus, obviously our hearts go out to them and their families, and we're obviously thinking about everybody and doing our part by practicing social distancing. We did close our facilities quickly, which resulted in keeping our customers and staff healthy. I'm also very pleased to report that our finances are healthy due to sound board policy and practices. In line with Park District policy, the district has a fund balance of over 25% of our annual expenditures for the year, which prepares us for times like these. Our capital fund is healthy with over $7 million, and we recently issued $7.25 million in a bond to help for capital projects over the next 2 years. As I mentioned earlier, with nearly $8 million planned for 2020, we do have the opportunity to evaluate these projects and make a decision to defer them to make sure that through this difficult time of closure, we can ensure a healthy fund balance for the end of this year and for future years to come. Lastly, I just want to say I'm very grateful for the great partners we're working with daily to ensure we continue to communicate the needs of our community and collaborate on keeping our community strong and healthy. We work very closely with all of our local municipal leaders at the City of Highland Park, School District 112, 113, Moraine Township, Lake County Health Department, as well as local healthcare providers such as North Shore Hospital, who are on the front lines, and we are very grateful for their service, for their work during this very difficult time. So I want to make sure to thank them as well. So that's my update in regards to our emergency planning during this time. And I just want to turn it over back to you, Brian, and see if anybody has any questions or comments that they'd like to ask me or share with the board.
All I can say is very well put. Commissioner Bernstein?
I really don't have anything to add. I appreciate everything that our executive director has done, and he's taken a huge leadership role with regard to this extraordinary time and situation. I know that he's worked collaboratively with our sister governments. He's been kind enough to keep us updated with regards to his discussion with the city, the health department, the school district. So I want to thank Brian for taking the lead on this. And again, these are extraordinary times as we're all sitting wherever we are listening to this meeting. So we're going to have to make some tough decisions moving forward, but I'm confident that we'll make the right decisions and informative decisions.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Thank you.
Ditto. Well said, Cal.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf?
Yeah, I share those sentiments, and I'm really surprised and happy to hear that we have so many of our residents and customers using our the online exercise and the other programs we're offering. I mean, it's really, really great to hear.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
No, I'll thank Brian and thank Cal for his words, which I think echo our feelings in total.
Yes, and I totally agree with that. Cal and Brian, or Brian, Cal, very well put. Next item, agenda item, approval of resolution 20-06, granting emergency powers to the board president and executive director during the governor's declaration of emergency. Director Romes to present again.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so similar to the necessary changes that I discussed earlier in regard to the Open Meetings Act and public comment, in compliance with the governor's executive order, again, 2020-10 for the stay-at-home order, it is requiring, obviously, employees, park board members to conduct business remotely. During this time period, the Park District finds it necessary to delegate emergency powers to the board president and executive director only during the term of the executive order to temporarily waive certain policies and procedures necessary to facilitate the continuity of the administration of the Park District and be in compliance with the limitations prescribed in the executive order. Specifically, this resolution allows the Park Board President and Executive Director to jointly exercise the authority to adopt such things as emergency regulations, emergency services, emergency policy waivers, emergency staffing and resource management, emergency spending, and there are a few other things noted in the resolution, but those are the most important, I think, significant things. A perfect example is during this time where we're obviously challenged with social distancing and staying at home, we have typically required that there's 2 signatures on every check. In an effort for us to timely comply with paying certain bills on time, we may need where we have to verbally get approval for something and have 1 signature on a check, things like that. So there's a variety of things that may come up, and this resolution allows for us to do that during this temporary time, be able to have flexibility to do things that we might need to do during this time of emergency. So with that, again, we're recommending approval from the Park Board, Resolution 2020-06, granting emergency powers to the Board President and Executive Director during the Governor's declaration of emergency. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Commissioner Bernstein.
Yes. With regard to these powers, is there, I didn't really notice this in the resolution. Is there, after you exercise, for example, you run a series of checks and one person signs, or you make it an emergency expenditure, is there any way or provision we can put in there that after the fact, within a certain period of time, a reasonable period of time, you'd have to notify the board that you exercise those emergency powers?
Yes, we can do that. Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you know, Brian and I have talked about this. Obviously, we would operate very openly, and these conversations would be had before they were conducted. It's just a matter of, we don't need to schedule an open meeting and have a board vote for something that may require that if it's an emergency. And so any of these decisions that would be made would be filed. They would be recorded and filed, and then they would be shared with the Board of Commissioners as soon as they were implemented.
And
I
think depending upon what it is, I think we will share with the board before we implement anything as well.
I know my only point is if obviously if it's an emergency and the decision needs to be made immediately, I mean, I trust both of you to make the prudent decision. However, after the fact, I think that there should be some mechanism where at least the board is notified after the fact, at least that decision was made. If those are the decisions that are made without the board input.
Brian, we can
So
add that in.
Yeah, it's in the resolution, actually. It does,
I missed that.
item B. Yeah, it's under let me see here. There's, I wish are you looking at your board package? It's right before the end of the document, letter B.
Can you just read that to us?
No. What's that?
Can you read that letter B?
Yep, it says, none of the emergency powers herein described may be exercised until after both the board president and executive director have signed under oath a statement describing with specificity the scope and purpose of the emergency action. Such statement shall be filed with the board secretary and Board of Park Commissioners as soon as practicable.
Okay, well, under that stipulation, obviously these are extraordinary times. I'm going to probably say that multiple times today. And I never thought that in a million years that we would be granting these emergency powers to our executive director or our president. But I think under the situation, I think that's the prudent thing to do. I think that, again, that's why we have Brian as our executive director and Brian as our president. So under those conditions, I will support the resolution.
Thank you.
Okay.
My turn?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioner Grossberg?
Yeah, my only question would be, I like that Cal covered kind of the after part. I wanted to cover the before part, I guess. I was just wondering if there was just a real difference in conscience and opinion on something between the two of you, even after Brian had contacted us individually as board members. You know, it's probably pretty rare. I do trust you guys to come to some sort of consensus, but is there I don't know, is there a superior power between the two of you that if it was just split 50-50 kind of thing, nobody could act without the consent of the other, I guess is what I'm asking. Does
Correct.
that make sense?
Yeah, so-
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, we obviously will still have our scheduled board meetings. So if any decision is made and there was any sort of disagreement with it, you know, certainly that could be addressed at the next time that was practical to meet, which would be the next scheduled board meeting, or we could schedule an emergency board meeting if we needed to, and we could ratify actions if necessary and things to that extent. So this is really if we need to make a decision in a very quick basis that we would have the ability to do that.
I would just ask if there was any reasonable, if there is any time, if there's any time, it would be great if there was something really monumental, if each of the board members could be contacted by Brian Romes. That would be really, I believe, important to me, at least. I'll speak just for myself. I can't even think about what that might be, but I would just love to know beforehand if something monumental is about to happen. You know, that's just me.
All right, Ron, you want to take it?
Yeah, I don't anticipate it would be any different than how we operate now. I think we obviously, similar to when we decided to close the facilities, you know, all board members were made aware of that decision prior to physically closing our facilities. And while there wasn't time to necessarily have long conversations with all the park board members, that decision was not made in a bubble, and it was made with obviously a lot of consultation and shared with the board prior to it actually happening. So we would act in the same manner.
Yeah, that's a good model to use. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. I apologize. Commissioner Flores Weisskopf,
I don't have anything.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Thank you. Yes, I do. I just want to make sure that it is clear in section 2A when it reads, Board President and Executive Director may jointly exercise the following emergency powers. Is it clear to the drafts person that you need both people to sign off on something? I know what jointly means, but it also could mean that each of them has the power. And I think the intent is that there has to, as this was brought up by others, this requires both people to agree to take an action.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, I'll reference again section 2, item B, that says none of the emergency powers described may be exercised until after both the board president and executive director have signed under oath a statement, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe it would require us both to sign something, and if we were both signing it, we would need to both agree with it.
All right, so following up on that, it then goes on to say that the statement is filed with the board secretary and board of park commissioners as soon as practicable. And given the conversations and some of the concerns, I don't think it should be as soon as practical. I think it should be.
How would you like it?
I think it should be immediately. Immediately on execution. And any action has to be provided not to the board secretary and board of park commissioners, not filed, but delivered to each of the commissioners at the, because filing means it goes to the, it doesn't mean we get them and know about the action. I'm just trying to address, again, some of the concerns. We need to know about these things immediately upon them, before and after. So I find, I'm just saying that isn't getting to the way I would like to have seen this operate.
Okay,
So can we cause that to be corrected?
I didn't think there's anything wrong with it. We can possibly change.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear everything you
I said
said.
we can cause it to be changed. I don't know if we need to cause it to be corrected. I'm not sure there's anything incorrect.
Well, I am giving you a dirty look for picking apart the words. I'm glaring at you.
That's fine.
All right.
I'm
So
looking back for not trusting Brian and I. Is that everything
it's
you-
not a question, no, it's not a question of trust. It's a question of implementation of policy and being able to understand what's happening in our district. But other than that, with, if we can get that slightly revised, I have no problems with this.
Okay. And I have no more to add. Do we need to go back around to commissioners again, or are we good? Okay.
I'm good.
Can I get a motion to approve resolution 2020-06 with changes as noted by Commissioner Bernstein and Commissioner Ruttenberg, granting emergency powers to the board president, executive director during the governor's declaration of emergency?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion on the motion, Commissioner Bernstein? Commissioner Grossberg? Commissioner-
Any additional discussion, or you asking for a vote?
Brian, hold on a second. Brian, I'm sorry, I was on mute. This is Cal. I'm reading the last sentence in section B. It says such statement shall be filed with the Board of Secretary of the Park Board Commissioners as soon as practical. Barney wants to switch that to immediately. What if there's a situation where it's not practical to do it immediately or at the exact same time that the decision needs to be made? What if they're out in the field and a decision needs to be made and they don't have access to be able to notify the Board of Commissioners at the exact same time? I mean, as soon as possible or as soon as practical, I think would be fine. I don't anticipate this becoming an issue, but I am comfortable with the current language where it says it's practical or as soon as possible.
That's fine.
Okay. So my suggestion, if the mover for the motion is willing to modify his motion so that the last sentence in B is modified to read, such statement shall be filed with the Board of Secretary, and it currently says, and the Board of Park District Commissioner as soon as possible or practical.
Yes, accepted.
Okay, there's a second or accept that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
you.
Barney, do you have any more to add?
No, sir.
Roxanne, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Flor Swicekoff,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Yes.
President Kaplan.
Yes, motion carries with the changes enumerated by Commissioners Ruttenberg and Bernstein. Next item is the consent agenda. Before we go, I talked to Brian Romes about pulling items G and H out, which are approval of landscaping services bid and routine grounds maintenance services bid. What Brian and I discussed was that we can have this done in-house until this is done, and then bid it out, because it's kind of really silly to approve a bid if we don't even know if and when that work will get done.
I would like to ask a question or two about item I, which is the license agreement with the North Shore Yacht Club.
Yeah, Brian, I thought we pulled that one out.
We did not, but we certainly can
Let's
pull it
pull-
out for a separate.
Let's pull that out and talk about it separately.
Okay.
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
We're taking out items G, H, and I, correct?
Yes, correct.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Roxanne, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Flor Swicekoff,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Aye.
President Kaplan.
Aye. Items A through F and and J through N have passed. Let's talk about under unfinished business. Let's start with item I, approval of the 2020 license agreement with the North Shore Yacht Club. Brian Romes, you and Mitch responded to an email from Laura Knapp. Can we discuss that?
Yes, do you have specific questions or would you just like a summary of?
A quick summary, and then we can go in.
Okay. If Mitch, if you're on the, I know you're on the call, if you're able to give a brief summary of the exchange between you and Lauren Knapp just regarding the agreement and where we stand with things. I know where there's some questions about if we decide not to open, if this executive order is extended even further, what types of things will we be looking at?
Sure, I can provide a brief update. So Laura had some specific questions since this agreement, if approved, would go into effect on April 1st or tomorrow, about as our facilities continue to stay closed, is there refund options that are available for the license fee? What I have informed her is that at this moment, we would work with the yacht club as soon as we understand when our buildings would reopen and look at some type of proration for the dates that they didn't have access to the building. She had some additional questions that were not necessarily related to the closures right now. It was more specific to high lake levels and storage, and wanted to know if there was any further updates. We had let her know that since the facilities are closed right now, both myself as well as Dan Voss are not available to go down and do a full assessment on the conditions and the storage opportunities. But that as soon as we open, we certainly will be doing that. And we will be contacting any boater who, at this point, their storage may not be available based off of the lake level conditions. And if there is somebody who has a deposit down on a storage space and we cannot accommodate them, that they would be entitled to a full refund. The only other thing was we have already sent a statement out to our boaters that said for non-motorized boating, that this year we are only able to accommodate our returning boaters from last year, and that every other boater would be placed on a wait list. And if a spot opened up, we would be contacting them in the manner of the wait list. So those were kind of the general updates and general questions she was asking.
So do we need to take action and formally amend the approval if it's the agreement of all the commissioners to prorate the license fee that the North Shore Yacht Club would pay depending upon if and when the beaches in that facility is able to reopen? Well, we'll go through. Commissioner Bernstein,
I have nothing to add.
Commissioner Grossberg,
No, the report was clear.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf,
Nothing to add.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Would the modification fall within the emergency powers?
Well, I think we could modify it. Can we modify it tonight and vote on the agreement as modified if we agree for the prorate, whatever the license fee is?
I would offer that it should, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in and I apologize.
No, contingent upon the time missed. Go ahead, Barney.
I was going to say, the agreement is wholly contingent upon our opening. It conveys no benefits to the yacht club at this point. And the fee is going to be adjusted based upon when and if we can open the facility. We could either modify it now or just defer it until we have a better handle on the time. And for all we know, there's going to be a material effect on the fees, which might affect the entire agreement.
So Brian Romes, why don't we take this? What would happen if we took this off the agenda and we did not approve it tonight based upon these conversations?
So the resolution that we did pass, to answer your question, we would have the ability to either modify the license or, if we needed to. And we also would have the ability to approve the license with any changes after this meeting if you either decided to approve it or not to approve it. So either way, we can still make changes to it and have the ability to adapt according to the nature of our environment at the time that we decide to, we're able to reopen and adjust as necessary, or we can defer it based on additional conversation with the North Shore Yacht Club and what their questions or concerns might be. So I think we could take action in either direction. I would say authorizing approval of this agreement tonight would still require signature from both parties. So tonight, what this would do would at least get the approval of the agreement, and then we can still exercise our right to sign the agreement or not sign the agreement, as could North Shore Yacht Club.
But if we change the language for proration, we need to approve the new agreement. If we approve it,
We could,
right?
Well, yeah, but there's more, guys, there's more than that, because if the agreement is effective April 1, but in truth, it is not effective April 1, it's effective at such time as we are able to deliver the facility to them. So that alone is a change we'd have to make.
So then I think we should just pull it off for now and bring it up at the next board meeting to see where we are with everything time-wise. Barney,
I concur.
we'll go through Cal.
I'll just I'll rely on you guys in this one. I really don't have a position on this.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Yeah, that sounds good. You guys are more intimately connected to this issue, so I'll
Commissioner
defer to you
Flores-
as well.
I'm sorry, Dave. Commissioner Flores.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. And let's move on to the rest of the unfinished business. The 2020 ice rink compressor replacement project bid. Director
Brian, excuse me, Brian, what about those two items you pulled off the agenda, the landscaping items?
I think we should pull those off and bring them up at the next board meeting based upon timing and seeing if we will even require the bid to go through.
Well, I mean, is your position is that even if we're sheltering in place, we're not going to cut the grass at our parks?
No, but Brian Romes and I discussed was based upon the amount of work that will need to be done now, it could be done in-house as opposed to bidding it out to an outside contractor at this point in time.
Brian, is that true, Brian? I mean, we could do this.
well, so yeah, what the suggestion is to reevaluate these contracts and have a conversation with the bidders of these contracts and to see if we can make sure the language states that we're not going to contract with them until we are full service open, because we believe we're going through the agreement. And right now I'm working with Dan Voss, obviously, who leads this, is working to see in the interim, while we remain closed, our facilities remain closed, we have obviously a pool of staff who we want to maximize the amount of work they can do during this time. And so we would reassign staffing roles and assignments to do this work in-house so that we can keep people active and keep people busy so long as these activities are required maintenance. So obviously, as part of the executive order, this has to be required maintenance that were essential maintenance for our parks and natural areas. So obviously, we're not just going to let our parks go. We're not going to let our natural areas go. There is some essential work that has to be done to maintain our property. So before we approve this, we thought it would be prudent to evaluate what we could do in-house during the time of closure and then renegotiate the agreement for when we reopen.
I have two questions. Number one is, what's the definition of essential maintenance? Is cutting the grass? Because we all know every year we all get the telephone calls once the dandelions come up, and why is there so many dandelions and why aren't you cutting the grass and things like that? So number one, is that essential? And number two, I get the idea you want to keep our employees working and busy. Do we have the equipment to cut the lawn and do the maintenance at all of our parks?
Yeah, so if we were, it'll definitely be something that we're evaluating. We don't have the equipment that we would do during normal times in the peak of, say, June, when the grass is actively growing and it needs to be cut regularly. We don't have enough equipment to keep up with it, more than likely. But again, if we're not open, we're not, there's certainly areas that we could evaluate for how often they need to be mowed versus other areas. I mean, obviously, sports fields are not being used during this current time. We wouldn't let them just go, but we certainly would be able to scale back potentially the amount of mowing. And I can let Dan Voss certainly answer questions directly. It's not to say that what we're saying by taking these off the agenda is we can do all the work. We're saying we've had conversations over the past few days, especially since the order has been extended to April 30th, to reevaluate this agreement and make sure before we approve it, we are pulling out necessary components and seeing what we can do in-house. So it may be a portion of the agreement, and we can bring this back in April.
Are we going to lose these contractors if we don't approve it tonight, or will they sit around and wait till our April board meeting to approve a modified proposal?
So I know Dan also reached out to ask those questions, and we weren't able to get an answer before the board meeting tonight. He didn't get responses from those bidders. So I think that's a question that we have to ask. And if we need to, again, come back in April to approve these, or if we need to have a conversation again to do an emergency executive order in order to get these approved, to get essential work done, we certainly can keep board members up to date and involved with that discussion, and then we can take action if we need to. But I think we're comfortable at this point not approving it tonight and giving us the opportunity to reevaluate the work.
I mean, I just don't want, I mean, one of the things that we can do under these current shelter-in-place conditions is that we have the ability to walk and do things outdoors, which, we could have more people in our parks, not necessarily together, but exercising and doing things, or just getting some fresh air as the weather gets nicer come April and May. And I really hate to have our parks not attractive, or not in a position where they can absorb the amount of possibly increased use that they may have with people just trying to get outside to enjoy the nicer weather, because there's really nothing else for them to do. again, this is not being done for the idea of sports being played or people congregating, but I can speak for myself. I'm spending much more time walking in the neighborhood than I ever did since the order went in place. And so I just want to make sure that we're keeping on top of it, because again, every spring we get the calls. Everyone on the board gets the calls of why there's so many dandelions and why do our parks not look nice. And you know, I want to make sure that we're on top of those things.
Absolutely.
I feel comfortable deferring this to April. I really don't think a business is in the position of turning us down, you know, if just because, especially because of how extraordinary these times are. I like the idea of keeping people that are being paid busy doing essential things. I hope they have the skills to do those things. But I feel comfortable waiting until the next meeting to handle letters G and H.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf,
I'm fine with waiting as well.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
I agree, we should defer.
and I agree as well, but we will keep on this. I agree with Cal, though. I've been walking in all of our parks daily, and we need to keep them looking nice, whether. Okay,
Absolutely.
next. Unfinished business, 2020 ice rink compressor replacement project. Director Smith to present. Jeff?
I think I was, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead,
sorry,
Jeff.
I was trying to unmute it. It's actually going to be Assistant Director Chris Malazewski who's going to present to this.
Okay,
Am I heard okay?
Mr. Malazewski, let's hear it.
Good evening.
Yes.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So if the board recalls, earlier this year, we went into a contract agreement with IB Story, which is an engineering firm specializing in ice rink compressor system replacements or installations for new facilities. Earlier in February, we updated the board on the current status of the project and the specifications and blueprints. Yep. I don't know, did somebody say something? I apologize.
Somebody wasn't muted, keep going. Chris.
Okay. So earlier in February, we updated the board on the state of the project, as we have received at that time specifications and prints for what the proposed system will be. Earlier in March, we had a mandatory bid walkthrough with interested contractors, of which we had 4 attendees. March 12th, we had our bid opening. At that time, we had received 2 sealed bids. One from Davis Mechanical Service in the amount of $2,497,500. The other, Stellar Industrial Solutions, in the amount of $2,250,000 even. If the board does recall, certainly not what was expected in terms of the bid proposal amounts. At that time, we re-engaged with our engineer, asking him if he believed that the bidding contractors had misinterpreted some of the specifications or scope of work. To which he then reached out to the low bidder, which was Stellar Industrial Solutions, to just get a better understanding of where they were at with the project, why their bid was what it was. And in discussion and determinations, Stellar Industrial Solutions lowered their bid to the amount of $1,828,000 even. After that was received, and due to the current situation and us evaluating all capital projects, we then found it prudent to go to our current preventative maintenance contractor, which is Air Comfort, to discuss what exactly it would look like if ultimately the decision was made to not proceed with the compressor replacement project this year. And what risks were there involved with us not replacing it due to the current age and status of the system. So their recommendations and our findings were that the system is certainly on its last leg. We have 2 leaks, one of which is a glycol leak, which is in the flooring. The other is simply a gas leak or a refrigerant leak. If you do recall, we are currently operating on R22, which is a phased out refrigerant, which is one of the other reasons why we are have engaged in this project. So the system certainly is on its last leg. I asked the question, what happens if the system were to shut down in the middle of a year? Is a rental unit immediately available to where we could resume operations fairly quickly? The short answer of it is no. They don't make rental units or units in a semi, if you will, to basically tie into the sort of system we have. A couple other accommodations that would have had to been made if we proceeded or foregone the project. It was recommended that we were to purchase 500 pounds of R22 to basically fill our system up to capacity and also have some on hand as we do have that gas leak. The expected amount of purchase for that 500 pounds of R22 would be about $15,000. I also asked the question, what additional maintenance would need to be made to ensure that the system remained as operable as possible, with the understanding that anything is possible in terms of the system shutting down. There were some small repairs recommended that totaled about $6,000, some valve replacements that are just corroded, inoperable, things of that sort. And then, of course, they recommended that us re-entering in the preventative maintenance agreement that we've had year in and year out with them to just ensure that the system remains as operable as possible. And that was approximately a $20,000 addition to the other amounts of which I already explained. We then also discussed with Stellar Solutions, as well as our engineer, IB Story, the likelihood that should we forego the project and we decide next year to rebid, would there be any expectations of a lesser amount being proposed to us? Once again, the short answer was no. IB Story felt as if this was the best price possible for the system that our facility needs. Stellar Solutions relayed to us that they are putting their best foot forward financially in terms of their proposal to get a project like ours done. And so with that being said, staff believes that should we go to bid next year, the pricing would not be any different than we're encountering now of that $1,828,000. So with that being said, staff's recommending that board approves the base bid from Stellar Industrial Solutions in the amount of $1,828,000. We did do reference checks. The 2 references provided were from the Florida Panthers and Dallas Stars. They had nothing but good things to say about the contractor, as they have either done work with or currently doing work with Stellar and have had nothing but great things to say about them. So with all that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions and go from there.
Commissioner Bernstein.
I really don't have any questions. I just have comments. I don't know if you want to have comments now or you want to go through questions.
Let's go through questions first.
Okay.
Commissioner Grossberg.
No, my question would actually be for the people that are handling finance. You did have a meeting last week, and I'm sure that this was an issue brought up there. So it would just be more of a comfort level as you've reviewed the budget, how you felt about it. But if we want to handle that later, we can.
Well, let's start again. Let's call it questions and discussion then. This is a big item. So I'll go back to Commissioner Bernstein.
I don't have any questions. I just do have some comments because this was discussed last week when we had our
Since you both have discussed comments, let's do that now as well.
Okay, so I don't have any questions for Chris, but my comments is this is a really tough call because it's a lot of money. It's a tremendous amount of money, and it's obviously in the middle of this pandemic, it's hard to write a check for the money, for this amount with even unsure whether we're going to be operating that facility next year. Because if you listen to Dr. Fauci, this week have a spike next year. We can have a situation where this all happens again. What we're dealing with right now happens all again next fall, next winter. However, that being said, it's an item that obviously, if we had a crystal ball here and we're able to operate the facility next year, I mean, there is a chance and there is a risk that the existing compressor will break down and we would not be able to operate the facility, and we'd be under the gun basically we'd have to close the facility, not operate the ice rink. So it's a situation where, I mean, I wish we didn't have to do this. I would hope that we didn't have to do this, but on the other hand, I mean, we have to plan that as if once we get on the other side of the curve, that we'll be able to continue to operate the district and people will come back. So the next thing that we analyzed and addressed was, could the district afford it? And as we were going to go through with the other capital projects, we were able to either defer or remove some additional capital projects or suggest, I said to remove, we would be able to suggest to the board that would happen. And we do have, we did do that bond issue back in February, which provided us money in the capital fund, that we do have the money to do it. It's just very difficult to spend it in this environment. So the long and the short of it is that we went back and forth in this, and Barney can supplement what I'm saying is that at the end of our lengthy and thorough discussion, it was our conclusion that we would recommend that we go forward with this project.
Okay, Commissioner Grossberg.
Yeah, that's actually helpful. Obviously, I was thinking it the same way. I was getting on the seesaw and looking at it both ways. I just wanted to ask Chris, I did think of some questions. You did briefly talk about this $15,000 for R22 and this maintenance and other things like that. Could you just give me a little bit? So let's say we don't do it right away, and then it's October's rolling around and the country looks like everything's looking up and whatever, and then it breaks down. You said that they don't come out with a big old truck of stuff and things like that, but could you tell me again, what would be a short-term fix for the rink?
So pending on what the reasoning for the breakdown of the compressor system would be, it would require an immediate fix. The price tag of that is certainly pending on what the repairs needed are. And I just want to remind the board that this is a project that's going to happen, if not this year, next year, for different reasons, one of which the Montreal Protocol, the life of the system having been met, et cetera. So we would be able to, pending on the repair needed, to have it fixed in a short time, we would hope, but that would then just be an added expense to that. So I think you asked also about the refrigerant, the R22, Terry, did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
So that is a phased out refrigerant. Essentially that refrigerant, R22, was under what's called the Montreal Protocol. It's been phased out globally. It is no longer being produced. What is in production and what is readily available, the prices are skyrocketing. So what I was told, the current status of that for 30 pounds of R22 is $500. And if we also were to purchase that amount of 500 pounds of R22 from Air Comfort or another contractor for that matter, the new mandate stipulates that they would have to also report that amount of purchase to the EPA, which would then put our facility under a microscope, and they would continue to monitor our purchasing of that refrigerant to ensure that we did have plans in place and we did have dollars readily available to replace a system like that. Because again, with that being a known cause of the hole in the ozone, frankly, they're certainly watching that with a really big microscope, if you will.
I'm surprised anybody's looking at that stuff. Frankly. Okay, so the fix will not be a simple one. How long, if you mentioned it, I'm sorry if I missed it, but how long will it take, if they started tomorrow, how long would it take to replace the compressor?
So a full-on replacement, our schedule, as it stands today, allows for us to shut down the system and melt the ice beginning June 1st. And our anticipated restart date is no later now than August 10th. One of the small concessions that was made in the reduction of price was that we extended the length of the project an additional 10 days. Our initial request was August 1, but there were some things like a small reduction in staffing for the project on the contractor's part. And with that being said, they requested an extension of time, which we're certainly willing to accommodate, considering we'd be saving so much money from their original bid. So the project in itself is about a 2-month full-on replacement.
Got it. So how much lead time would they need for us to approve the June 1st start date?
If we don't get this approved tonight, frankly, we would have to push it to next year regardless. That's how tight of a schedule it is right now.
Okay, well, okay. So it's not a matter of we could push this back a month.
No,
It's pushing it back 12 months.
Unfortunately not correct. We would have to wait till this time next year.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
Yeah, this is a tough one, but I do feel in the end it's the right thing to do right now. It is a lot of money, and it's hard to just sign off on it without really giving it thought. But I think this lends itself to the idea that Cal brought up about keeping our field up to standards. And this is similar to a field with dandelions and God knows what else. So we owe it to that facility in the same way we would take care of a park. I feel comfortable doing this, and that this was brought up, Chris brought this up to us prior to this happening, and we knew it was urgent and it needed to be addressed. And lastly, I think the fact that we do pride ourselves on being green, it's disturbing to know that we're using a solution that is being, regulated, the use is being regulated, and it's something we want to stay away from anyway. So, I'm all for it. Again, it's still hard to sign the check because of the times we're in, but I just feel this is one of those necessities.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Thank you. When do we have, what would the payment for this be? How much do we pay up front, and when would the payments be due?
I'll defer to Director Smith, Jeff, on that one, if that's okay. I don't have the terms in front of me. He may.
I don't have them in front of me either, but I can say that we've already paid some for the engineering. So regardless of whether or not we defer the construction till next year, there are some funds that we've already paid out and we're going to be finishing paying. But as far as the bulk of it for this, I would need to double check, but it's likely that it'll be done in portions, in some portion during the summer and then near the end of the project. So mostly between June and August, we can say, as one of the reasons we have to get started now is there's a significant lead time on ordering that equipment. And so we would be billed out during the construction of the project.
And if the coronavirus situation is bad as the year goes on, and can we defer any part of the project once we get started if we have to?
Unfortunately not, because we would have, I guess, the time and place to be able to do that would be prior to them demolishing the current system.
Right.
And that would be in the first, essentially week or two of the project. So call it, the first week of June.
So we do have a trigger date in June that could allow us to do something.
I don't know the contractual terms. We'd have to look back at that, Barney, but the spirit of the question, I will answer it as such, yes, but I don't know the contractual terms.
All right, thank you.
Well,
May I ask one more question, President Kaplan?
of course.
So another thought, have we done or can we do some kind of analysis as far as would it be prudent to go ahead and spend this money or just assume shut it down and know that we're not going to have hockey? What would that cost be? Would it would that help us make this decision easier, I guess is what I'm saying, where we can say, yeah, we can either spend this or we can save, $200,000, but then we lose the Falcons or someone for, the rest of our days.
So the thing anything is certainly possible, but Centennial is one of the larger revenue producing facilities within the district. A significant component of that revenue is ice rental and things of that sort, as well as our Learn to Skate classes. So while we certainly could just shut it down, for lack of a better term, I don't know that that would be ultimately the best decision financially, and certainly not being a park district or a town that doesn't provide an ice arena for, the largest youth hockey group in the state of Illinois either. So that would really be a tough one, Lori. I understand what you're asking, but I don't know that that would be well received.
Okay, yeah, I just thought I'd throw it out there just to make it easier for us.
Totally
to,
understood. Yeah, totally understood.
Yeah.
All right, and I agree with, I think it was Callan, everybody, we need to move it forward with this. The coronavirus time will end and we still have to keep up our facilities and our services to the public. Unfortunately, timing is everything, but I think the alternative is closing our hockey rink for a year, our ice skating rink. It's not worth it. Any other questions or comments?
Brian, my concern is that we should have the contract carefully reviewed so that if we find that we're going to be September, October before we could operate the facility, then do we want to spend the money this year? That's what it comes down to. And I think we need to have we need to understand the contract. The staff we should look at the contract from the perspective of what happens if we suspend the project in the middle after it's demolished. I understand.
Mm-hmm. No, I think, Barney, that's a good point. And we could certainly look at the contract and discuss with the contractor that if at any point prior to demolition, we make some sort of decision to postpone until the following year, can that contract remain intact? Is that more so what you're getting at?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll
certainly look at that.
I think that's going to be problematic because they're going to be ordering the equipment.
Yeah, that's another, and I don't know their storage capacity, but it's certainly something we could bring up, and they may or may not be receptive to it. We'll report back.
And again, I just don't see any company turning down business right now. I mean, I really think that this is such a huge amount of money that they should be bending over backwards to, we all are living in the same, reality. So I'm interested in learning what kind of flexibility they have before I would go forward, I think.
But we have to make a decision tonight, otherwise it's not going to happen this year.
Is it really tonight?
Yes, that's what Chris said.
Yeah.
I heard Chris say that, but is it, if we had a special meeting next week just to handle this, you telling me that can't happen?
Chris?
I mean, Barney, you're not going to get the answers that you're looking for between now and 5 minutes from now, right?
I am not, but I am prepared to vote for this, knowing that we do have the staff understanding what the issues are. And if it turns out that it's all or nothing, I agree with many of the comments that have been made that we may not have a choice and we have to go forward.
Okay, well, if Barney's content with that, then I'm ready to vote.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the 2020 ice rink compressor replacement project bid?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Can I
Second.
please get a second?
Second, Cal.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Roxanne, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Flor Swicekoff,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Yes.
President Kaplan.
Aye. Motion passes with the discussion that we had tonight. Next, same topic, same problem, Hidden Creek Aqua Park pool filtration system installation bid. Director Carr to present.
Thanks, President Kaplan. I'll do the same as Chris and give a very, very brief history here, and then kind of go through where we're at in our recommendation. So the brief history is this project is a three-phase project. Phase one was the engineering and design, which we reported on in December. The next phase was equipment purchasing, which was discussed at the January workshop meeting, and the recommendation of the equipment to purchase was approved for purchase by the board at the January 28th board meeting. And we have since entered into a contract for procurement of that equipment. The last phase of this is the installation component. And we completed the bidding process and have received 2 qualified bids for installation. Those were opened on March the 17th. The lowest qualified bidder was Stuckey Construction Company at a cost of $177,000. Our engineering firm, WT Group, does have extensive work with this company and had comfort in recommending them for this project. The cost estimate for equipment installation was $220,000. So this is a very competitive bid at $43,000 under the anticipated cost. The full financial impact of this project is in your memo in the packet tonight, but I'll kind of briefly go through it. The total project budget was $425,000. And currently our total estimated project expenses, which would include all of the engineering, the purchase of the equipment, as well as now the installation, is totaling $435,200. So it does place it $10,200 over budget. However, this price does include circulation pumps, which were deemed necessary to replace during our engineer's design work. We've talked a little bit about these before, but these pumps were budgeted in the 2022 capital plan as part of routine maintenance. And the money allotted for those in the 2022 budget was $23,000. So that $23,000 can now be removed from the 2022 plan if we approve the installation. So taking this into account, this project would be actually a savings of $12,800 to the 5-year capital plan. I do want to talk a little bit about the timeline because it has been impacted. We were already in a little bit of having a little bit of an issue with the pumps and the amount of time it was going to take to receive the pumps. However, that has been only exacerbated by the COVID-19 situation. So there are some supply chain issues. And in addition to that, the there are concerns about getting the necessary permits for this through the Illinois Department of Public Health, which is a requirement, given that their resources have been appropriately dedicated to the COVID-19 response. So with all of that knowledge, right now the memo shows a timeline, and staff is recommending now deferring this project to the fall. While the system isn't efficient, it still will provide and deliver safe and clean water for the pool this summer. We have talked with our engineering firm, the construction team that would do the installation, and our equipment supplier, as well as our own internal staff. And everyone does believe that we can get one more season out of this system. And I have talked with the contractor about being able to defer this to the fall and still lock in the pricing on their bid, and they are comfortable with that. So with all that said, we would like to get approval from the board tonight to enter into a contract with Stuckey Construction in the amount of $177,000 for the installation of the filtration system, with the knowledge that this would be deferred to the month of September after the pool closed for the season. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Again, I don't have any questions. I do have some comments. I don't know if you want it now or do you want to wait?
Let's do them now. Let's do it all
Okay.
at one time.
I appreciate it. I mean, with everything going on right now, it's hard to coordinate deliveries, in the next 45 days. So I appreciate staff's recommendation of pushing this project to the fall, knowing that we still assuming that we get the all clear that we'll be able to operate the facility this summer. I will want to mention one other thing is that when we met last week with the finance committee, we did look at this facility and we did defer other projects for this facility. For example, one of the things that was was currently budgeted for 2020 was repainting the pool. We decided to defer that for another year, consistent with other facilities, like what we can do to push back a year or to eliminate altogether in order to save money and to better bolster our cash flow as we deal with the national crisis. So I'm comfortable with pushing this back to the fall. My only question would be is assuming we push this back, and again, this one's an easier decision than the last one regarding the compressor because we're basically in the middle of this project. We've already expended a lot of time and money getting to this point. So we're just trying to get over the goal line on this one. My only question would be, is that if we deferred it to the fall, when would I'm probably preempting Barney's question, but when would our payment be due?
So the payment for the work would start with the installer as the work is getting done. We certainly have made other payments, as you noted, with engineering, and as the equipment gets delivered, we will have to make those payments. But as far as installation, those would be deferred to the fall.
And by deferring this to the fall, that's very beneficial to the district because obviously while our facilities are shut down right now and our programming is ceased, or has been suspended, I should say is a better word, obviously our revenue is very limited. Hopefully by the time this project rolls around next fall, the revenue stream will be picked up, it will be resumed. The faucet would be open at that point, and it would be easier to manage our cash flow. So I'm supportive of moving forward, but deferring this to the fall.
Okay, Commissioner Grossberg.
I am perfectly comfortable deferring this to the fall.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
Same.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
We approve now and the work is done in the fall.
I agree with everything that's been said. Can I get a motion to approve the Hidden Creek Aqua Park Pool Filtration System installation bid with the caveat that the work will be performed in the fall?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Roxanne, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf,
Aye.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Aye.
President Kaplan.
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, Resolution 2020-05, authorizing a contract for procurement of the Recreation Center of Highland Park Cycle Equipment and Program. Director Melizuski to present.
Hello, once again, can I be heard?
Yep.
Yeah,
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So if the board recalls earlier this month, while I was not present because I was ill myself, however, Jody DiTomaso, our manager of fitness, provided the board what I was told was a very nice presentation outlining the process and steps that were taken for staff to evaluate as well as get feedback from many different facets of the facility, including members and staff. With that being said, upon that presentation, it was determined that staff is recommending we proceed with the purchase of what is called Stages equipment and the coinciding flight software. So staff is recommending approval from the board for Resolution 2020-05, authorizing a contract with Direct Fitness Solutions for procurement of the said equipment and program. It is a sole source purchase in the amount of $57,770. In the same spirit of the previous discussion, given the certain circumstances, staff is planning to, at this point, defer the purchase of said equipment until it's better understood what impact our current pandemic situation has on membership, as well as engagement in our cycle program. If at any time it's deemed as if it's not advantageous or wise at any given point to purchase those cycles, we would not. But we are still requesting approval at this time with the understanding that once we do reopen and it's better understood where the facility stands, we would better be able to determine if the purchase is necessary at that time.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Bernstein. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Chris. I appreciate what Chris said, and Jody did make a very compelling presentation at our last meeting, or it just seems like it was years ago. Just so much has changed since then. But I would be recommending not to go forward with this item tonight, to defer this until probably late summer, fall, to determine what the how the usage is impacted by the pandemic. I don't see the reason or the necessity to vote on this tonight. I appreciate the staff will use the best business judgment and whether to move forward or not, but I am not comfortable voting for this tonight.
Commissioner Grossberg.
I did have a question for Chris. Let me just think if I can remember it again. We still have the situation. We still have the bikes there now, right?
Correct. They're beyond their useful life, but they are still servicing our members. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
Yeah, this one's tough, but I'm going to have to say no. I think that long after the restrictions are lifted, there's going to be aftermath. I mean, I don't see anyone jumping to cram into a room with a bike side by side. So unfortunately, I thought the presentation was great, but it really has nothing to do with that. It has to do more with the situation and how I think people will move forward after the restrictions are lifted. So I at this point, I'm not comfortable moving forward with that.
Vice President Rodenberg.
Thank you.
You're
Well,
welcome.
I agree that these are the bikes we should wind up with. I don't think this is the time to approve the purchase after we've reopened and we evaluate the participation. The bikes will still be available. So I would say no.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to take this off of the agenda. We will not have a vote on it. Next item is approval of the 2020 Park Avenue dredging bid. Director Smith to present.
Thank you very much. So I will say I am going to be presenting on the next 3 agenda items, and I want to kind of speak to all of them for a moment. So these are all recent bids, and typically this is the point where staff would come to the board and recommend approval of these projects to move forward. However, with the understanding, as we've been discussing, that the district has been looking very closely at capital projects right now and suggesting that we defer many of these non-essential projects. I will say that staff is looking for direction from the board on each of these projects. While we do have somewhat of a recommendation, we are certainly looking for some direction from the board on those. And with that said, I'll start with the dredging project. So just to briefly go over the scope, this is the annual project that we do at Park Avenue to essentially make the boat launch operational. So it is essential to operate the launch there. It's a matter of moving out sand, lake bottom sand that decreases the depth of the water. So we remove that so that boats can get in and out. The sand is then placed back in the lake in a different location. So I will say that we had 3 bids received on February 13th for this project. And the low bidder was John Keno and Company, which is a contractor that has done this project in the past for us. And their total base bid was $32,400. The budgeted amount for this project is $37,000. I will point out, though, that this project is broken up into 2 items. For our bid form, we have item 1, which is the mobilization and demobilization. And Keno had bid $11,700. And then the other item is a cost per cubic yard of dredged material that they have to transport and replace. And they bid $11.50 for that. So I bring this up because what that means is that while their total base bid is $32,400, that's based on the maximum amount of sand that we could dredge based on the permit that we have. But the likelihood of them dredging that amount is very low. Looking at what was dredged last year, we would estimate, including environmental testing costs, that the project would likely come in closer to $20,000. So this project will probably be between $20,000 and $32,000. Any comments or questions?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Yeah, Jeff, I have a question. If we don't approve the dredging, how would that impact, assuming there's going to be a boating season, how does that impact boating?
So staff actually went out, it was about a month ago, and we took soundings. We went along and we tried to measure the depth. And we try to keep, we have certain depths that we want to keep out there. We looked at this closer, and it looks like there were areas where it was somewhat problematic already. So we think we could have some issues with boat launching as of now. And what would happen is essentially you would have a boat that would hit the bottom. If that makes sense. And this includes the sand ramp area as well that we're looking at.
So does that mean that we couldn't safely operate the boat launch without doing the dredging?
Yes, I would say that's correct. It's difficult to say how much sand is going to need to be dredged. I'm certainly not an expert in this, but my understanding is that based on the initial measurements we made, it was deemed that it looked like it was going to need to be dredged. And I will say, under high lake levels last year, we still did remove some dredged material. While it was much less than we have in past years, we still did remove some dredged material.
That's all my questions.
Thanks.
Commissioner Grossberg?
So I guess I'm even less familiar with the dredging. I'm not sure that I've ever been around where we've actually talked about what exactly happens and what high lake levels has to do with the amount of dredging and things like that, and what do future weather patterns affect, what are their effects on dredging. So can somebody with some expertise tell me what does dredging that area look like?
Jeff?
Yeah, so well, you have a machine come in the water. It has, obviously a long arm and it basically scoops out sand in these areas. So I apologize, I don't have the map to show you, but we have a designated area so many feet out from the launch and on the side of, on the sand ramp side, so on the west side of the launch that they go in. And if the water level is too high, they may not be able to get out as far as they typically do. So that's one thing that the lake levels will impact. And secondly, if the lake levels are very high, there's simply not going to be as much sand they're going to have to dredge because we have more of the depth there. So what will happen is they'll scoop this material and then they will place it back in the water in a designated location that is west and south of the launch. And this has all been determined and approved through our permitting that we have.
It's west and south, but still in the water?
Yes, it is in the water.
And that's still on our property? Right?
It's in the designated location that's been approved through all the permitting agencies.
Okay, so it is in your estimation, though, of what Cal was asking, that the boaters would not have success launching their boats if we did not dredge.
I would say that's certainly a high likelihood.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf?
You know what, can I hear what Commissioner Ruttenberg has to say? I feel like he's well versed in just this whole issue. Yeah, it would be helpful.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
I have a real problem with our committing $20,000 to $30,000 at this time for a project that may not occur until and be useful until much later in the year. And I don't know the economics that we're going to incur from launch permits, which may be refundable, and just the general usage. I'm very concerned about spending the money and having it lying fallow for a long period of time.
The only question I would have in response to that,
I'm sorry?
I do have one question in response to that, and I understand what you're saying, but will we be able to properly dredge it at a later time? And is this the same kind of contract where if we approve it tonight, it wouldn't be done until it was timely anyway?
So the scheduled date for the dredging is mid-May. We certainly could defer this to next month if we chose to. However, I would say that when we let this bid out, the understanding is that it was likely that we were going to award the contract now. We would give the contractor a heads up and they would plan for the work in May. But it's certainly a possibility, and we could reach out to the low bidder and express that we would not be approving it for at least a month. And at that point, I would like to think they would still have time to mobilize and complete the work as needed.
Okay. Lori, any comments or questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
We'll go back in order. Vice President Ruttenberg?
I would like to defer this from the agenda and not vote on it today.
Okay. Commissioner Bernstein?
I don't have a problem moving forward tonight.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Nor do I. I feel like we can vote. We can vote against it, but I feel like we can vote.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf?
I prefer to defer.
Commissioner Ruttenberg?
If we don't defer, I'm going to vote against it.
And then Jeff, I just have one last question. Is this the same as the other thing we've talked about, where even if we approve it tonight, it will come back before us, or we will discuss it again before we move forward with the project and the final bid?
I apologize, but I had a hard time understanding you there. Could you repeat that, please?
If we approve this tonight, would this be something where it might not be done without additional board discussion on it?
Well, certainly, if you chose to approve it that way, we could. Like I said, if we deferred it, the thing to keep in mind also is even if the timeline was impacted, we didn't do the work in May. These were obviously extraordinary circumstances. It could delay the opening of the launch, maybe delayed anyway, for all we know. I know we can't predict the future. But to keep it in line with May, we probably want to approve it tonight, but there's a chance that if we approved it in April, we still may be able to have it open to the regular timeline. That answers your question.
Yes, it does. Any other comments by any of the commissioners? Well, let me go back because my screen changed and part of what you said was beeped out. If we approve this tonight, the work has to be done in May.
No, so the work is scheduled for our typical operating season. And so it'd be done to open for Memorial Day. Obviously, like I said, these are extraordinary circumstances. We may be forced, or the board may choose to delay the opening to that site, but just be aware that it wouldn't officially be open until the dredging occurred.
And if the opening got delayed again, we wouldn't have to move forward with the dredging again. Is that correct?
If we didn't open the boat launch?
Well, right now we know that nothing can be open until May 1st, if you realize, correct?
Yes.
And even then, we don't know what's going to happen on May 1st. If we didn't approve this tonight and it came back in May when we had a better handle on it, would we be able to dredge it? Let's say if we're allowed to open in June, on June 1st, would we be able to get a dredge and ready to go by June 1st if we had to wait till May?
Yes, I believe that's most likely correct. Once again, we would reach out to the contractor and discuss this with him, but I would say that's probably correct.
Brian, can you say that last part again? You're getting farther and farther away from my ears. What did you say that Jeff agreed with?
What I'm trying to figure out is if we approve it tonight with the caveat that the work won't begin until we have the board discuss it again. And we know that social distancing and the closures are going to carry out through April. But if we find out in late April or early May that by June 1st we could open again, will that be timely enough to dredge it to open the boat launch on June 1st if we put it off till May or June on a boat?
Oh, let me,
Very artfully said.
Brian, may I just say, and if it opened June 15th under those circumstances, that would not be the end of the world for anybody.
No, I understand that.
And I have a question. Does delaying this make it a harder project or more difficult to do?
I would say no.
Okay.
I have a quick question. How many permits have we sold so far for this year?
Mitch, I'm going to let you answer that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Cal, I don't have that information. I certainly can get it for you. I know we have had, as soon as we opened up, we had a lot as far as registration, which was on the 23rd, I believe, of March. We had a lot of questioning on, ability on refunds and things of that nature. So I just don't have the information, but I can get it to you guys very quickly.
And when we put this facility in our program, do we put any dates that the facility is going to be open?
Yeah, we opened the season on Memorial Day weekend. That's the schedule opening.
So prior to Memorial Day, can boaters access the boat launch?
They can. It is staffed from Memorial Day through Labor Day.
And how do you police or verify that before Memorial Day, the people actually using the boat launch have permits?
So that would be similar to on our, let's say, our weekday schedule where we typically don't have a staff person there. It is on the honor system, but the police do patrol the area. Obviously, during the Memorial Day through Labor Day, they're patrolling it on a heavier basis, but they do patrol the lot to make sure that the boat itself, the trailer itself has its permit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I'll ask it this way. Is there a motion to approve the Rosewood Park drainage and grading improvement bid now?
Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know. This thing is kind of acting up on me right now.
I'm getting some flashes and
I mean, it's going back from the agenda to my participants. I've been muting when I'm not talking. So, before a motion, I just want to make a comment. I think what I heard tonight was that we cannot operate we can't operate the boat launch safely without the dredging. So the question I have is whether we do it now or whether we do it a month from now, are we going to operate the boat launch this year? Because regardless, we're going to have to dredge. So I don't understand what the issue is.
Commissioner Rodenberg?
I'm not fully prepared to answer Cal's question, the basis that we might not operate a boat launch this year. We don't know. We don't know the mechanics of the barge being operable. We don't know the height of the water. We don't know so many factors that at this point, we may not operate a boat launch. And it may be that we operate a boat launch starting in July. I can't answer those questions. And I'm giving you these reasons why I prefer not to take a vote on this, but if we do, my vote will be no.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what my fellow commissioners feel about this thing.
I will tell you that I have no problem taking a vote on it, and that I have no problem approving it with a caveat that it would come back to us beforehand so that we can discuss it, especially based on timing. I mean, if we can't open till July or August, we might not need to spend that money. But if at the end of April, we find out we can open at the end of May.
Are we prepared to issue refunds or credits against the people buying season passes?
I think in this time, we probably have to. Especially if people bought passes before the coronavirus. I think it's something out of everybody's hands, and we have to order either refunds or pro rata or share refunds.
I have a question for staff then. I mean, you heard Barney's concerns regarding the dredging. Is that based on the lake levels, the the condition of the barge or the breakwater or you put the virus aside, has anybody been down there and inspected the facility in the last 2 weeks? And is there any change or anything you can lead us to believe that due to the conditions down there, either at the breakwater or the lake levels, that would prohibit us from operating a boat launch this year?
This is Mitch. I can say that we haven't been down there. The gates have been closed. If all things were, normal, right now, what we would be saying, and we have said this to the boating community, is that our plan right now, and before we had closures, was that we would operate boating on the condition that we would need to continue to evaluate lake levels, primarily from the standpoint of can we or can we not safely roll out the dock itself. If lake levels continue to rise, it does put that dock in jeopardy from being able to safely be secured to the groin. But, as we have talked with the motorized boaters in particular, very frequently, to say, we just don't know what that's going to look like until the day that we normally roll this out, which is mid-May. It's right around the same time as the dredging, in which the parks team go and install the dock. So at this point, we were planning, because that's all we know right now, is that we would plan to do it. And if for some reason the lake levels were extremely high, well above even what was projected right now, it would put in jeopardy our ability to launch the dock.
I don't know if I got an answer.
Well, I think the answer is sort of a yes. And that's why I'm taking the view of let's review this next month. But if there's a desire to have a vote, if you'd like a motion, I will make a motion so that we could take a vote and everybody knows what the vote is.
I've got to ask for a motion. It doesn't mean I'm going to get a motion in a second. Take a vote.
So before we go down the motion route, so run us through the scenario is if we push this decision off a month, how does that impact a mid-May? Let's just say, for example, putting the coronavirus aside, let's just say that on May 1st, everything opens up and the sun comes out and it stops raining and everything goes back. What is that? When would the earliest we be able to, assuming we don't approve it, when's our April meeting? What date is that? Anybody know?
Currently, it's scheduled for April. The board meeting is April 28th. That's the way it's
so
right now.
So if we did a meeting on April 28th and we approve the dredging, because it looks like that we're on the down other side of the curve, and assuming lake levels are at a level that looks like we'll be allowed voting. If we approved it April 28th, how quickly could it be dredged, and when would we be able to open under that scenario?
So our dredging is scheduled for May 11th to May 15th. So once again, I think it's very likely that we could stick with that schedule. In communications with the contractors in our bidding documents, we state that anticipated approval would be now. But even April 28th, I think would most likely give the contractor enough time. Like I said, after this meeting, I would reach out to the contractor and let them know the circumstance that they are still a little bitter and we are considering it, and the decision will be made on the 28th. So they would be given enough notice. And
so they would still be able to meet that May 11th through May 15th window then.
I can't speak for them, but I would think it's most likely they could.
Okay, then I don't think there's a need for us to vote on it tonight. If we can see what happens in the meantime, and then if we decide to move forward, it's not going to impact our scheduling. That's what I'm hearing, at least.
Okay.
I agree.
And I'm not going to get a motion in a second. We will remove item D from tonight's agenda. Item E, approval.
Wait, Brian would just, with the caveat that that would be put on the agenda for our next meeting.
Our next regular meeting.
We're deferring that item to the next meeting.
Item E, approval of Rosewood Park drainage and grading improvements bids. Jeff, do you have any more to add?
For the drainage and grading
Yes, sir.
or the dredging?
For the drainage and grading.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, this is a project that we discussed at the last workshop meeting on March 10th. I know the board's very familiar with it. Joel Kennedy Construction was the low bidder on this. They actually reduced their price. It was a total of $299,881. This project is doing some drainage and regrading along the ravine path at Rosewood Park to alleviate some long-term flooding issues and also to regrade a small portion of the path that's very steep. And this is one of the projects that staff have looked really closely at and trying to determine whether this is essential and needs to be done at this time. I will say that it was scheduled for the month of April so that it would not impact activities going on at Rosewood Beach in May. But this is certainly a project that staff is looking at, saying that if we do need to defer some projects, this could be a project that we could defer to a future year.
Okay, and what would happen to our property if it was deferred?
Well, the goals behind this are when we have heavy rains, we get a lot of runoff along that path and rutting, and Parks Crew have to come back and fill in those areas and repair that. And so it's a lot of work. It can be an uneven surface. But the other reason, and one of the concerns, is we may have a situation similar to Moraine Park, where there's water that rolls down that bluff, which is what essentially causes those bluffs to fail. And we could have a failure at a section of that, which would make that trail impassable. Now, I will add, though, that unlike Moraine, Rosewood Park has another point of access along the stairway, and then there's also the lower lot that you can drive to.
Okay. Commissioner Bernstein?
I have no problem deferring this for a future year. Hopefully by next year, we'll be able to do this project.
Commissioner Grossberg?
Same.
Commissioner Flores Weiskopf?
I agree.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
We had discussed this at the Finance Committee, and I believe the thought was that we would defer it, but wanted the full board to understand the reasons for wanting to do the project. So I think we should defer it.
Okay. And then show that item E, approval of Rosewood Park drainage and grading improvements bid has been deferred to a later date. Lastly, item F, Rosewood Beach Recreation Cove Protection Project.
Yes, so this is the project that Smith Group was out at the March 10th workshop meeting and reviewed the plans for this project. This would be the recreation cove at Rosewood Beach, the cove that was not nourished as part of the emergency project last fall. Would be bringing in stone to add to the interior side of one of the breakwaters in the recreation cove to mitigate sand migrating through that area and being lost in the cove. And it would also be bringing in additional bird's eye sand into the cove to provide more of a beach area, but also to protect the boardwalk in the back of the beach and the playground and shade structure, in which the shade structure is starting to be undermined. So we released two separate invitations to bid for this project. One was for the purchase of the sand and the stone, and there was a separate bid to hire the contractor. So for the Rosewood Beach sand and stone purchase bid, the low bidder, ironically enough, again, was John Keno and Company. They were the low responsible and responsive bidder because out of the three bidders, they were the only contractor to bid on all three materials we were asking for a price on. And their bid was in the total amount of $172,811. And the second bid, which was the Rosewood Beach Nourishment Project bid to hire a contract to place the material, There were two bidders, and the low bidder was John Keno and Company. Their total base proposal was $133,032. So the combination of the purchase of the material and the placement of the material comes to $305,843. And the board may recall at the last meeting that Margaret Boschek with Smith Group had said that the estimate for this project at this time was $310,000. So it's right around the estimate. And when you add the engineering fees and the construction oversight fees, it brings us to $324,000 total. We have $350,000 budgeted in capital for this project in the capital budget. Now, I will add though, while staff feel that this is important and does provide some needed protections in the recreation code, similar to the other projects we've discussed tonight, there would be the option for us to move this to the April agenda and readdress it then. We would hopefully know more about the situation with COVID-19. We would also be able to see how things are faring in that cove over the next month. But I do want to stress that the reason we were looking to do this in the month of April was to not impact programming and rentals in the month of May, because there were a number of them scheduled. Now, understanding it's very likely some of those programs may not occur, even if we're back operating in May 1st, and we're not sure about rentals. But just keeping that in mind, if we move this to make a decision in April, we would not be able to operate any programming or rentals in most of the month of May. We expect this project to take about 3 weeks, and it requires closing down the lower lot because you have lots of trucks coming in and out, and it's simply not safe for people to utilize the site.
Okay, are you done, Jeff? I apologize.
Yeah, well, I'm done. Thank you.
I didn't mean to cut you off. We've talked about this topic often. I guess I'd start by being curious if it was discussed at the Finance Committee and Commissioners Dornberg and Bernstein could share their thoughts and discussion on this item at the Finance Committee.
Do you want me to go first?
Of course.
You can go, Barn, if you want. Well, you know, that's the problem having B as your last name. I'm always going first. You can put me at the end. I'm fine.
No, you're not.
Okay. This was discussed extensively at the Finance Committee, and for all the reasons that we talked about previously, why this is an emergency repair, and you know, I reviewed the minutes from previous meetings preparing for this meeting tonight, and we've talked ad nauseum about that, and I don't want to keep talking about the same issues, but obviously this is an emergency repair. And so this is something that we left in the capital as a recommendation to leave in the capital budget for 2020. But while I was been listening to our entire conversation, one other point I'm just going to raise about this is that I'm a news junkie and I follow what's going on in the world, and I watch a lot of things on TV. And one of the things I've been hearing a lot is that even when assuming the shelter in place order is lifted at the end of the month or next month or whenever it is lifted, is that we're still not over what this coronavirus is. And they use the word social what's the word, social distance or whatever. It's really physical, and by I hope that people are be able to come this summer to enjoy the outdoors, and if we have more space and more sand and more areas for people to hang out down there, maybe people are not going to be on top of each other and so close, and that social spacing or that physical spacing will be benefited by adding this additional sand. So we can't we have to for we've talked about in the past, we have to protect our investment and beep bop boop, but I'm hoping that I'm an optimist, I'm a Cub fan, and I hope that come May, when things get loosened up, that people would be able then to enjoy some of our facilities. And I hate to have them not be able to get down there because we're staging in the parking lot, and the parking lot is closed. So I see no reason why we don't go forward with this tonight. For all the reasons that we've talked about tonight and everything we've talked about over the last 6 months.
Vice President Rottenberg.
Oh, Cal said it all. I think that, and we did spend a lot of time. There will be a pent-up demand
For outdoor space.
for open space, for going to the beach, for this type of recreational activity. Even, you know, if it's July, it's July. If it's August, it's August, but it's going to be there. And I think this is one that I agree with. We should proceed.
Commissioner Grossberg.
Well, you guys know kind of how I feel about it. I feel like that third cove is a luxury. There's no particular investment that we're protecting other than, that beach area itself. So I think even more now than before that I'm pretty set in my ways that I would not approve that.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
I would approve it. I know other than the beach, it has to do with the playground equipment and it's expensive to remove it. So I'm in favor of doing something.
Can I add one point? Excuse me for jumping in out of order. To address Terry's point, if we don't do the work at this cove, significant work on the sand replenishment, then the playground structure has to be removed. And that is not a luxury. Perhaps playing volleyball on the beach at this part is a luxury, but the playground's essential for anybody who has little kids.
Well, I think we have different definitions of essential, but I'll just agree to disagree on that.
Fair enough. All right. If there's no more comment, can I get a motion to approve the Rosewood Beach Recreation Cove Protection Project?
So move.
Can I get a second? Okay.
Did
Sorry.
someone second it? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I'm sorry. I second.
Did you second it? Okay.
I second.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Commissioner Bernstein.
Aye.
Okay, Roxanne, Cal's ready. Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Bernstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Grossberg,
No.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf,
Yes.
Vice President Ruttenberg,
Yes.
President Kaplan.
Yes, motion carries. Next agenda item is the Treasurer's Report, Director Peters to present.
Okay, good evening. Can everybody hear me?
What?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so in your packet, you have results as of February 29th. And if we look at the general fund, the interest income was trending high due to the amount of money in the capital fund that we did not spend last year that was earning a pretty decent amount of interest. However, of course, with the plummeting interest rates at this point, the variance will probably narrow as the year progresses. The general and recreation funds include monthly budget allocations for payroll that are spread equally over the year. And as we had discussed last month, the difference between the budget gap and the actual should close as the year progresses due to a large portion of the January payroll being accrued back to December. And then additionally, causing more than $100,000 variance in the general and recreation funds is the absence of the Park District's health and risk management monthly insurance premium payment due to PDERMA. The February insurance was not paid until March, while the budget amount is allocated evenly over the year. And additionally, not all positions are currently filled at the Park District, which allows for even more variance between budget and actual. Contractual services were largely under budget due to less than anticipated legal fees of roughly $27,000 and police service fees were under budget by roughly $18,000, as the first payment for those services don't get paid until March, but the amount was budgeted over all 12 months. Additionally, contingencies were under budget by $8,000, as no contingency dollars have been used. And then finally, there were some ecological restoration differences between budget and actual by about $8,000. In the recreation fund, the program revenue was over budget, largely as a result of Park School being over budget by $33,000 due to the allowance of early registration fees coming in. And while we have made some adjustments to the budgeted amount, some variations are still partially due to budgets still needing further reallocation over the course of the year to better match when revenues and expenses will be hitting. Fees and charges were largely over budget due to permanent tea times coming in at roughly $13,000 greater than what was budgeted. Personal training wages were under budget by roughly $12,000. Utility differences have timing differences of roughly $50,000. And then finally, pension contributions were trending down with unfilled positions and turnover in staff that went from Tier A levels to Tier B replacement. And then finally, if you look at the capital project fund, the spending came in under budget, as timing and billing for each project is difficult to determine. We will continue to spend more money on capital in March. However, it is not going to be much. And then obviously, based on discussions this evening and the discussions at the Finance Committee last week, I would expect that capital project spending will come in under budget as the year progresses. And that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Again, I don't have any questions, but I have a comment.
Okay.
This is probably a good time to report on the Finance Committee meeting last Friday. Just for the other board members, we spent 3.5 hours talking about the current budget, different forecasts with regard to obviously changes in revenue and changes in expenses that could possibly happen as we deal with this this pandemic. We also discussed, as we discussed tonight, we also discussed capital projects that we'd either go forward or recommend deferring. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think I just, again, we spent 3.5 hours. It was a very productive meeting. I anticipate as we deal with this crisis that the Finance Committee will be continuing to meet more than usual. We will keep an eye on again, as the forecasts adjust, as revenue, as we have to vary our forecast and our potential revenue and expenses as we move forward, and also keep a really close eye on our cash flow to make sure that we are still trying to adhere to our policies. So unless Barney has anything he wants to supplement, but I think that we're committing that our time and to this issue. So whatever is necessary, whatever you want to do, I mean, we're available, and I'm sure the rest of the board members are also available. But just for the public to know that we are keeping a very close eye on our financial health of the district.
I have nothing to add.
Okay, Mary Lynn, do you have any more?
No, that's all I have, but I absolutely agree with Cal. We will be starting to close the March books tomorrow, and we should hopefully have those closed by Friday or early next week. And then again, once those are closed, we can, more easily and more accurately update our future projections.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
New business, Parks Foundation update, Commissioner Grossberg to present.
I'll be brief. I was unable to attend the meeting. They did meet via Zoom or Skype or something. Just a couple of updates that the Champions Banquet, of course, has been postponed. They're working with Chris Chelios for an October date, but there's really nothing new to report other than that on the Champions Banquet. There was a lot of work again done on the kind of the governance side of the board, and I won't bore our large audience with the exact details, but they're talking about changing the number of directors on the board and the terms for those directors and a few other things. And the next step in the process to approve the changes to the charter, and then at the annual meeting vote on the board members. They are setting the annual meeting for May 19th, according with the bylaws, and all the directors are on board for that. Through marketing, the brochure, they have a new brochure. So they are asking that board members and others have a copy of those, or a couple of copies of those in case anybody asks about the foundation. They have a great new website that's been an awesome new addition. One of our student leaders has taken a real active role in it, and she's just been amazing. She's a junior at the high school. And we have some new board members that have some expertise with that. They're going to be launching it in mid-April, and Liz is helping out with the content that's going to go on that. Finally, the golf scholarship that was we finalized about a month or two ago has only received 4 applications. They're looking to extend the deadline to try to get more people applying. They were hoping that they would have 10 or more people, but so far it's only been 4. And that's really it.
Okay, thank you. Director's report, Executive Director Romes, present.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I don't have anything additional to report on that I did not already report on at the beginning of the meeting in regards to our emergency response planning efforts in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, just want to say how much we appreciate the cooperation and patience of the community during our temporary closure of our playgrounds and our facilities, and certainly are hopeful to reopen those soon, but obviously in compliance with the governor's order through the next 30 days, the month of April. And of course, want to thank the board for their cooperation with the Zoom meeting tonight, and for the insightful discussion and the direction to staff on some of these projects. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. For board comments, I'm going to open up, and I'm just going to say that I am extremely impressed with Brian Romes and his staff and our entire staff on how they've handled this pandemic, these issues, and they've dealt with it every day. They come back to us with answers every day. They're working harder now than maybe they worked before all this happened, and proud of our staff. Any other board comments?
Yes, I have actually a question for Director Romes. This is a question I've never asked in my history on the park board. Is that now that we have a lot of empty facilities and a lot of our staff is sheltering at home, how are we monitoring our facilities and parks? Are we emptying the garbage, and how are we doing periodic inspections? Or can you tell us what's going on, how that's working?
Yes, so we have a facility staff member checking on all of our facilities daily, and there are certain necessary, essential routine maintenance practices that we must continue to do during the closure of our facilities. And if Mitch wanted to extend any additional information on that, he certainly can jump in. But they are being checked on daily, and then our parks are also being checked on daily. Trash is being picked up at all of our parks to ensure that, obviously we don't have any issues with that, and to ensure that, there are no issues. So yes, staff are still doing routine checks daily. And if Dan or Mitch have anything to add, certainly please do.
No, I mean, the only thing I would add to what Brian already said, that's a very good summary. There are certain facilities like Centennial and the Rec Center that have a little bit more complex mechanicals, that there is a lot more detailed maintenance that we're doing on an everyday basis. With the knowledge of the extension of the stay-at-home order today from the governor, we will be assessing things a little bit differently. So knowing that we're now going to be closed in certain facilities, like the Rec Center, for a 30-day period, we're looking at things like maybe draining the pool now and saving on some of those utility costs and maintenance costs, and potentially doing some of that preventive maintenance while the pool is shut down, since we do have a known 30-day period now.
And I assume all public bathrooms remain closed while the stay-at-home order is in place?
Correct.
And what about, when do drinking fountains get turned on, or have we even thought about that? Are we going to do that?
I'll let Dan answer when they normally get turned on, but my assumption would be that we would leave them off during the duration of this order. But Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's usually something that starts to happen mid-April. So at this point, I would not look to be turning those on until, our situation changes in the stay-at-home pieces.
Okay, and then we have signs that most of our parks are at playground equipment, that the park's closed. I haven't noticed one yet. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know that. Go ahead, Dan. You could say a little summary of where you put them, and we are putting more out this week. But
yeah, so the playgrounds that we are able to close that have fences, such as Kenneth Park and Brown Park and Lincoln Park, those have been closed where we can have a little bit more control. And the ones that do have signs, Sunset has more than the rest signs, and we'll be putting out more in the next day or two. We ordered some more as well.
And whose responsibility is it to monitor our parks, our beaches and our parks, to make sure that people are not congregating? And is that the police, or is that something we should be doing?
So we're definitely cooperating with the police in every regard that we possibly can, so that they can spend their time on essential service or essential calls and reports that they need to attend to. But we put our gates up at all of our beaches to help prevent congregating in those spaces. We've actually closed the path down to Rosewood Beach because we found that people are congregating in that area. And as Dan said, or as I had mentioned before, we are having staff check on these facilities. We actually have put a staff member over at Sunset Valley because there were quite a few golfers who were using the course, and it was actually problematic because we had some people walking the course, we had some people biking the course, and then we had some people playing the course all at one time, which is problematic on numerous levels. So we had signage out there, and now we have a staff member out there just reminding people that unfortunately we are closed, and it's important that they remain, only walking or jogging at this point.
Hey, Brian, that's my question. If someone wanted to go to Sunset and walk or run the paths, that's okay?
Yeah, they could run or walk. We don't want bikes necessarily on those cart paths, just because we don't want to give anybody an excuse to start running their bikes down the fairways. That would damage our fairways or damage our greens. So I think walking is certainly okay, but as much as possible, we certainly don't want people cutting through with their bikes on the golf course.
Okay. Thank you. Any other
That's all.
board,
Yep.
any other board comments? Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So
I
move.
move.
Wait, have we already done open to the public to address board?
Yeah.
That's on here.
You did that first.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I rechecked and I had no more emails just in case, for public comment.
And there's no closed session tonight?
No closed session tonight.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, nice
Aye.
meeting.
Thank
you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Great
night.
meeting, Brian. Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Stay
Thanks,
safe.
everybody.
All right, good night.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Good night. And thanks to the community for logging in. Thanks.